driving down the Sawmill Parkway the other day when I saw a beat-up old Toyota plastered with bumper stickers. The most prominent one read, and you've seen this before, "Beam me up, Scotty. There's no intelligent life down here." Of course, unless you've lived under a rock for the last half century, you know that those words come from the old Star Trek television series. But did you know this, and it would rock your world to know that the idea of teletransportation really was never once spoken by James T. Kirk. Those words, "Beam me up, Scotty," never came out of Captain Kirk's mouth. And the whole idea of dematerialization, that is, taking objects, transporting them, or turning them into energy beams, and pointing them toward a planet's surface, they only came up with that idea because they couldn't figure out how to land that awkward-looking spaceship called the Enterprise. And you know those special effects in the 60s? All they did was dump glitter and stir it into water to make the sparkling effect of being transported from one place to another. Today is Ascension Sunday. It's a rather unknown Sunday when it comes to the 1 billion or so Christians around the world. It's not like Easter or Christmas. Not many people know anything about Ascension Sunday. In fact, only one of the 4 gospel writers, St. Luke, even talks about this Sunday at all. Here's the general idea. It's 40 days after Easter. And Jesus takes his disciples on a hill outside of Jerusalem, and he says, "It's time for me to go." And with their mouths wide open and staring up into the skies, he disappears. He ascends, he's transported, he ascends. Well, that's kind of hard for us 21st century inhabitants of Earth to understand, I think. It reminds me of an old device in the Greek theater called Deus ex machina. And that is, when the hero of the story came to a point in the play where it just couldn't be resolved, there had to be some kind of intervention, they would lower God in a machine, Deus ex machina, and that God will somehow resolve all the problems. You know, it seems to me that a lot of people look at God in the same way. Either God is in some heaven far away and distant from us, only to be called upon when we're really in times of trouble. And like Deus ex machina, he's lowered down into our world to deal with the things that we have to deal with. But what if God isn't in some heaven far away, but if God is right here with us? God's in line with that single mother with kids who needs food to feed her family. God's with the couples trying to figure out if they're going to be evicted this week. God's with the parents who've just been told that their child has cancer. What if God isn't far away, but God is right here? There's a story about Mother Teresa and a journalist who wanted to get an interview with her. So he travels to Calcutta, goes to her hospital. He goes early because it's quite a journalistic coup to speak with Mother Teresa. And he speaks to the secretary and she says, "Mother Teresa is very busy, but if you'll sit in the hall and wait, I'm sure she'll come see you." So he does what he's told. And as he's sitting there, he notices down the hall, there's an old stooped over nun wearing blue and white. And she's very quietly moving from room to room, cleaning out bedpans, changing linens, bringing food. He notices, but he doesn't think about her. And time passes, he waits. And he gets up and asks the secretary, "When will Mother Teresa see me?" "She will," says the secretary, "but she's very busy." He goes back to his seat and waits some more, and minutes pass, 10 minutes, a half an hour, an hour. He gets up and asks for a drink of water. "Will Mother Teresa come see me? We have this interview, this appointment." And all this time he's noticing this old stooped over person in the background, going from room to room, dealing with patients who are in times of difficulty. Finally, he sits there for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And in exasperation, he gets up and just leaves. He never sees Mother Teresa. Of course, you know that old nun. Well, that was Mother Teresa. He came looking for a hero. He came looking for someone who was larger than life. But the whole time, she was right there with him. What if God isn't somewhere far away, but if God is very close to us, right where we are? What if God doesn't care if you believe or you don't believe? What if God doesn't care what you've said or what you've done or how much you've hurt other people? What if God's arms are open to all of us? On this Memorial Day weekend, I'm reminded of a story told many years ago during the Second World War of 4 soldiers. After a particularly fierce battle, one of their comrades is killed. And they decide that they don't want to leave his body lying on the battlefield. So they remembered that there was a little church behind the lines. And so they carry their fallen comrade and they take him to the church. And in the church, there's a cemetery surrounded by a gate. And as they go to the cemetery, they knock on the door of the church. And a stooped old French priest comes to the door. And in their best way possible, they try to ask if they can have permission to bury their friend in the cemetery. The priest says, I would like to help you, but this cemetery, it's only for people of our own faith. But he says, you can bury your friend outside the gate. So they are too war-weary and tired to argue. And so they bury their friend outside of the gate. Well, night falls, and they have to hurry their task very quickly to complete it. And the next morning, they're given the orders to move out. But they feel that they really didn't have a proper way to say goodbye to their friend. There were no words spoken, no prayers uttered. So they hurry back to that little church, to that cemetery, to see where their friend was buried. But when they look outside the gate, they can find no grave. They search, but they can't find the spot where they buried their friend. So they go back to the church, knock on the door, and again the priest comes to the door. They ask him, where's our friend? We buried him right outside the fence. And the priest tells them, last night I couldn't sleep. And so I got up and I moved the fence. And now he's on the inside. My friends, God isn't far away. No matter what we've done, there's grace, there's forgiveness, there's a welcome for every person. Every one of us are inside of God's fence, whether we believe or whether we don't believe, because God's love is big enough for us all.